Salvete mihi nomen est Stella et hoc est Batgirl the Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast, episode 219 for March MMXXII. May Caesar rest in peace. Batgirl the Oracle is brought to you by MileHighComics.com, your new and collectible comic book store. Mile High Comics has an inventory of over 5 million comics from the gold, silver, bronze, and modern age, and over 100,000 trade paperbacks. If you're not into the vintage stock, Mile High Comics also has a subscription service called the New Issue Comics Express, offering a discounted price for comics ready to hit the shelves. So if you're looking for vintage back issues or a great modern subscription service, be sure to check out milehighcomics.com. Well, depending on when I would record this, I think this intro would have varied greatly. I was thinking about coming in hot and being really upset at my working situation. I was considering coming in very angsty and talking about all of this or just getting real with you. But I feel like if I got real with you, it'd have to be NC-17 because it certainly got pretty dark. Let's just say that times are not the best, but I have empathy and compassion towards a couple people groups that, again, this podcast is an NC-17, so I can't really talk about who those people groups are. Maybe one day. And also I've gotten back into doing morning devotionals, which has actually been really helpful, I think, just to get me in a better headspace. And I've also tried not to spiral out of control and I've tried to stop gaslighting myself. So if I reach negativity, I try to pull myself out of there. And so it's been a bit better. All that to say, it's been a bit better. It really depends. But working at the hospital is certainly, there's a lesson. Oh, I guess this is really true of any place, but certainly a lesson in humanity, because you'd think it'd be like the best that this world has to offer because you are actively helping people. But just like everywhere else in the world, we are all fallen human beings. So we just have to keep on keeping on. And so that's what I'm trying to do. So it could have been really dark, but I will just end with that positivity that things, I take it a day at a time, and I'm just trying to look on the bright side. And I did find out that a friend that I liked, and she's a lot of fun from my previous work in healthcare when I was a screener for the oncology department for UVA. She's coming over to the hospital. So she's not in my department, but just the fact that I will actually have a friend there, I think will be great. So yeah, man, I have learned a great deal. I need the year to go by, and being in grad school, I think, has certainly given me a purpose. And just like keep your head down and do it, and don't get in anyone's way. And then if people are talking about you, it really is on them, because I'm literally not doing anything. But it's interesting. It is interesting. And I've really been more introspective, I think, than I normally have been, and reached conclusions that I think I should have reached earlier, or really should never have gotten to that point, asking myself, am I actually a bad person? And then coming to the conclusion that, I might not be the best of people. I might not be a good person, but I certainly strive to be. And I think the people that I surround myself with would not want anything to do with me if I were a bad person. And I try to live authentically. I think this podcast, you see pretty close to an authentic Stella. So you people, you listeners, you viewers would also, I think, not want anything to do with me if I were a bad person. So that was, a conclusion I reached, that I probably should not have even gone down that path. But this is just something that the job brought out of me. But all that to say, that depending on the time of the week or the month of this month, really, that it could have been really dark opening, but it's kind of a grayer opening with some positivity, and we'll just keep making it. And I feel you, some people who have terrible jobs or people treat you crappily, I'm there with you. And I can only give some personal advice, which is basically, yeah, get yourself out of those negative thoughts. If you feel like you're kind of drowning in them, just pull yourself out and try to do something else. And it depends on your religiosity or your spirituality, certainly. But I think starting off the day, or at least having these moments where you are looking to something greater, or at least like meditation or something like that, just calming yourself before, I think that starts off the day in a positive way and hopefully can kind of help you carry through there. But speaking of angst and emo, if we want to talk about it that way, I did see the Batman. I like to call it Bat Jerk Live just because we know that he's a big old jerk. And it's fun. Funnily enough, though, there were two jerky moments in the film. One of them was his first interaction, I think, with Alfred in the cave. And he's like, "You're not my father." I'm like, "Oh," or maybe Alfred said, "I'm not your father," and Bruce said, "I'm well aware." No, I think it was the reverse where he said, "You're not my father," and Alfred said, "I'm well aware." I thought that was a jerky moment. And then Alfred had just gone through this life or death situation. He's in the hospital. He wakes up for the first time, and Bruce, he doesn't say, "Hey, I'm glad you're awake." He says, "You lied to me." So, hey, that was Bruce Shukroff. But I have to say, I really, really enjoyed the Batman. I highly recommend it. I wasn't sure what to expect. As you know, I was betrayed by the Spooderman, and I thought, "Oh no, is this going to betray me as well?" But I really enjoyed it. I thought that there were so many notes of hope that that character doesn't necessarily bring, that creators don't necessarily tend towards. And yeah, I just thought the ending, especially, and how he was talking and saving those people, and hope through the Batman, which is something that you don't notice. Using the Riddler in number one, just using the Riddler, and then number two, using him in an ingenious way. Catwoman Zoe Kravitz was just amazing. Robert Pattinson as Batman was amazing. I really enjoyed it. I think the Alfred Batman relationship was pretty weak, but I mean, I certainly understand why they went that route. And I think if they continue with this set of characters and actors, that the ending point, they've reached a good starting point in their relationship at the end of the film. And a lot of it, I think the film was Jim and Batman's relationship, which of course I thought they did really well. And an example of a film that uses, in contrast to Spooderman, uses humor well, sparsely, of course, but when it hits, it's like, oh, there's this moment of levity where we can breathe. Sometimes just the delivery. So, highly recommend the Batman or Bat Jerk Live. And you won't be disappointed, of course, with seeing Batman be a jerk. And I think that's it for, DC news and things like that. So I'll just hop right on into the Find Your Joy segment because as my intro, I think, had attested, boy, I've been trying to find the joy in order to get away from the sorrow and I don't know how I would the sorrow, the despair, the negative human emotion, both inward and outward, I suppose. And I have started rewatching Clone Wars. I got to a point where I needed to finish The Bad Batch. I think I watched maybe 3 or 4 episodes. I just wasn't really into it. Omega was annoying me. I didn't really feel any sort of kinship to the actual Bad Batch. And so I thought, oh, I just need to finish it. So I ended up actually enjoying it. Omega grew on me. And then just because the animation style, and I had talked to Jacob at the gym at one point, I thought, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to rewatch Clone Wars. And so I have finished kind of Clone Wars. I need to rewatch season 7 to actually complete it. But that was a fun ride. I forgot that some of the episodes are sort of out of order in terms of time, and you kind of have to reorient yourself when someone pops up that was supposed to have died, a couple episodes back, which is always interesting. I guess if you want a perfect rewatch, you kind of have to reorder some of them. But yeah, just really good. seeing Ahsoka grow up has been a lot of fun, so that was great. And then my final find your joy is playing Resident Evil 5. I recently, because of Jaime, I played Revelations 1, Resident Evil Revelations, and that was okay. I don't know if I spoke about that. I really liked the setting, which was this ship, claustrophobic as I think all Resident Evil games should be. And the creatures were okay. They're not my favorite. I think I just like the classic creatures that you see in 1, 2, and 3. And I really liked the Jill parts, but I didn't like any other character basically. I didn't like her partner. I didn't like how you were repeatedly switching away. There were either flashbacks and you were playing those flashbacks, or you were with Chris and his partner. You were with these two duds. I can't even remember their one of theirs name was like, I swear, Ballsack or something like that. Those two characters, oh my gosh. So it was basically like all this annoyance. And then when you finally got to Jill, it's like, oh, okay, well, we're finally in there. But it just breaks up the story. And I wasn't really engaged with anything besides Jill. And now we're playing Resident Evil 5. And I say we because Harry, aka Harold, it's one of his like top games, I think. I think there's a lot of nostalgic love for it. It was, I think, in an era of action adventure co-op games that he used to play, couch co-op. And I had told him that I was, doing this Revelations and then 5 and then Revelations 2 and then 6. And he asked if he could play Revelations 5 with me. I was like, sure, why not? Of course, it involves more because I had to do a subscription to PlayStation Plus for the online, which is a bummer because PlayStation used to be, play online for free. And then he of course has to get 5, but it is, I can't imagine it any other way than playing with co-op. And I've not really played too much online stuff. I I mean, really, I'm on my own, so I'm just playing single player basically, except way back, I used to do Need for Speed online or do some of the Uncharted stuff online, and then with Marvel Ultimate Alliance. But this has just been a lot of fun to play alongside somebody. And he's Sheva, who's his favorite character. It's his darling, and I am Chris, and that's fine with me. If we were, if I had other choices, I would of course be Claire. But oh, that'd be fun, a brother sister duo. But there are some hilarious things that happen. Of course, this game is a bowl of racism because of the setting and the zombified Africans and just it's bad optics basically. But it has been fun. I like the creatures. I don't really understand that particular zombie, Los Plagos 2, I think it is. Just that they're carrying guns and they can roll and hit cover. I'm like, this is weird. Zombies shouldn't be like this. And we just reached it seems like the final in a series of final boss battles, and we were having some struggle. But there have been times that I just crack up because Harry will say something like, I'm in the midst of doing a mirror puzzle and he's out of the way because I killed him by accident once by turning the mirror the wrong way and some light shined on him and he burned alive. So he's in a safe haven and he says over the microphone, I just ate an egg. And I'm in the midst of this and I just start cracking up. So it's just been a lot of fun, and it certainly is something that has brought me out of the doom and gloom, just to some fun escapism, and then also just being with somebody and doing that. So we should finish on Wednesday. I think we have, of course, we're on the last part of chapter 6, which is the final chapter, and then I think there are 2 bonus levels, so I'm looking forward to that. And then I'll send that back to Gamefly and get Revelations 2, which I think is also a co-op. So we might be doing a couple co-ops in a row. And then there's this game. I mean, now basically what happens is with me is this kind of this landslide effect where you ask me for one thing and then I say, sure. And we're also going to do all this. So not only is it 5 and Revelations 2, he also offered 6, but I think 6 is like 20 plus hours. So that's a heavier investment. But there was also another game that I wanted to try out that seems really good, but you can only play a co-op, and it's A Way Out, where I'm not sure if they're brothers or just really good friends in prison, and you have to solve separate puzzles and all of that. And so basically we've got this line of games, and I mean, my Gamefly subscription certainly works well. So for that, but yeah, so that has been bringing me some joy and yeah, keeping it up and we'll see what happens. The question in regards to the racism of Resident Evil 5, and I've asked this of Harry twice now and he doesn't have an answer, so I'll probably ask him again and he still won't answer it. Is how you could fix it, because if you wanted the story to be that they are testing out this virus on third world countries in order to, topple governments or just test it out, there are particular societies and cultures that fit those sort of schematics, and I don't know how you would exactly have that particular story and not have the visual issues that we're doing. I mean, I'm just thinking like, what if you tried India or Cambodia or, some other place? I think there's still going to be issues. So I don't know how you have the story that you want without running into issues. And that's kind of my question. So if you want to have it take place in Africa and you are targeting this poorer village or nation and creating political unrest, the people who are going to be the victims are of course the Africans, and then that's what's going to happen. So I don't it's a tricky situation. I think it's almost like you have to throw out everything in order to do that. But and then it's a bummer because, well, Africa's a pretty cool setting to have, just in general. So I'm not sure. I didn't really I don't there's just some like weird stuff going on, I have to say. I felt like it was the Resident Evil games that I really like once you get to, I don't know, kind of like the factory setting and then turns into a lab and just like it felt more claustrophobic, like I said, because the first couple chapters, it's you have more space. Of course, you're getting flooded with infected Africans, but here it's like, oh, these small corridors, there are liquors around and all of that stuff. So I felt like, oh, this is Resident Evil. But yeah, I don't know how you necessarily do that then. And I think maybe they tried to alleviate the situation by having Sheva, who has a bizarre accent that changes with every word that she speaks, literally. And so maybe they were trying to, okay, we've got this white guy, colonizer looking dude, let's have someone else. But there's some colorism there because if you look at her and on the cover, when I was kind of looking at him, like that could just be, that could be Jill Valentine right there because Sheva's really light skinned. And then in comparison to, I think his name was Josh, he was darker and he was actually an African native of and was a part of BSAA. So yeah, I don't know. I think they could have done a better job, but perhaps the reason colorism exists is, because lighter skin, quote unquote, is more palatable, is sexier, is, I guess, makes or reaches standards of beauty according to people, society. So I guess that's why they did that with Sheva, but I would almost wish her to be really dark skinned and then I wonder what it would be like, or to have commentary, actual commentary on what was happening. But anyways, I can't solve the racism in RE5. It's been in existence for a while now. So unless they decide to remake it, and I don't know what they would do with that. I'm hoping that they would remake other games before that. So we'll see. Okay, I think that's it for my Find My Joy segment. So now I'm going to go on into comics. So I think it feels like it's been a while, but I think I've come to an understanding with myself on what Batgirl the Oracle is going to look like for the foreseeable future, potentially to the end. Who knows? I know that there are a couple of the, obviously we've got War Games, and I guess Infinite Crisis, but I don't know how many other events really I have. But I feel like I'll just have quickies, which probably is going to be a Robin and a Nightwing, and then I feel like every other episode is going to alternate. So I'll have some Batgirls one episode, and then Birds of Prey the other, and so I'll just do that until the end. And that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking right now, and try to do an arc or so like that. Okay, so here are my quickies. I've got Robin 109, Scattered Fruit Part 3, Bug Out. February 2003 is the cover date. It's the final showdown with Caraxus or Charaxus. I think it's Caraxus, but he's not the only threat waddling around Gotham. Even with guest stars Nightwing and Oracle, Robin's got his hands more than full with the giant aforementioned bug and a very real, very deadly threat that imperils. Spoiler. So Oracle actually interrupts Dick and Robin talking post Carax's fight to say that there's a siege in progress where Stephanie lives, though Oracle doesn't know that Stephanie's actually there. But when she says the neighborhood, Robin's like, oh, Steph's there. So I wonder if something's going down. So that's really where Oracle appears. Nightwing 77, The Web, March 2003 cover date. Bloodhaven's few good cops go bad as a super steroid rampages through their systems. Nightwing goes from protecting the police force from the Haven to protecting the Haven from the police. So Dick actually wakes up in the clock tower, having slept on the couch, so don't get too excited. Babs says he was sleeping pretty soundly. The Bloodhaven Police Department is a bogus job that he doesn't really need anymore, but he really isn't listening. He kisses her later on and says, I love you. And after he leaves, she actually snaps out of her brief love days and whispers, I love you, jerk. After Dick kicks Tarantula out of the hero business in Bloodhaven, he calls Babs and she wants to see if he's coming over so they can talk about that morning. And she wants to apologize about being cavalier about his day job. And she's worried he's just doing too much. He's taking too much on his shoulders, which he is wont to do. And he kind of ignores all of that and just says that he wants Babs to keep track of Tarantula, updates her on his new partner in the police force because his old partner got moved up to captain, and just ignores everything else, and then discovers a dead body, and that's how the issue ends. So I need to tweet out, I think, Devin Grayson, but I wanted to see where that story potentially goes, but just kind of the weird tension between Dick and Babs. And I can't tell, like, Babs is clearly upset with stuff, as you can see with her facial expressions and what she's saying. And Dick is either purposely ignoring the things that she's bringing up, or he really is thinking about so much that he's not listening to her. And then, of course, you have Tarantula going on. So I kind of want to first see where that storyline is going between the two of them. I guess two and a half if you count Tarantula, and then reach out to Devin Grayson and kind of see what her intentions were and where her mind was as she was writing this couple. So that's it for the quickies. So I'm going to review Batgirl 34, 35, and 36. And originally I just thought it was 35 and 36 because I was on my Excel document. And then I saw that actually 34, I skipped it, but it's just that Babs was not on that. So then I went back and I read it, and I have to say that it made sense, or at least a detail in 35 made sense once I read 34. So I'm glad somewhat that I read 34, but I feel like I have the least amount to say about 34. So this is going to be pretty quick. I think even 35 and 36 is going to be a bit quick as well, though I have some praise as well as some serious criticisms on this as well. So Batgirl 34, Lesson 1, writer Kelly Puckett, penciler Damian Scott, inker Robert Campanella, colorist Jason Wright, and digital chameleon. January 2003 is the cover date. A boy named Bobby and his father are killed by gangsters led by Mr. Ving, who are trying to move into Gotham City. Batgirl wants to help solve the case, and Batman tells her she isn't ready to be a detective. Mr. Ving goes into hiding when he learns Batman is on his trail, but Batman and Batgirl track him down anyway. They fight his men, knocking them unconscious, and Batman identifies Bobby's killer and writes DNA on his forehead for the police. Batgirl feels like they didn't do enough. Mr. Ving and his men might have been brought to justice and they cannot kill anyone else, but that isn't enough. Batman says, good. Now she's ready to be a detective. Okay, so just to talk about the cover here, lots of colors going on, maybe a bit too much. All primary, aren't they? All primary colors, but you got blood spatter, and the dead body chalk and the yellow of the ooh, police line don't cross. And then in a magnifying glass, which is blue, you have Batgirl and Batman. I think a question here really stemming from this is pretty sad, honestly. I mean, the father says, please forgive me, son, knowing that his son's about to die. So, a question here, and this image here actually will pop up as well with Batman holding this hair in a ridiculous way. It's going to re-pop up. He says, you're not ready to be a detective yet. And a question I had immediately after that, and then going on because Batgirl's trying to become a detective, is when is someone, quote unquote, ready to be a detective? Now, at the end, if I just go and give Batman's answer, right? It's really feeling that your job is not done, that your best maybe might not be good enough, and that even though you saved dozens of lives, as he said, you still lost some people. And that's why she's ready to be a detective. I feel like that answer is not ready to be a detective, but ready to be Batman. A detective to me, man, I don't know. I don't know what a detective to me is. So let me sort through this first. But just hearing all that, that's the fact that Batman doesn't settle, which I think is fine. I'm trying to think. I've got to work through this here. His job is never done. And I think that is one of the dangerous parts of his personality, is that he will never stop. And I just wonder, is that something that Cass needs to also bring in her personality? That, nothing is good enough. And two people died. And even though you saved dozens, it's still not good enough. And I can understand, two people died, but that it's not like you were on the case while those people were alive. You came onto the case after their death. And then in their memory, potentially, or to help so that it doesn't happen again, you did all that you did here. I don't I feel like he's likening, I can't wait to hear what people have to say, people being Donovan, but I feel like he's likening being a detective to being a god almost, and like preventing, you're a detective now. We've got to prevent everything from happening. And that's not the role of a detective, I don't think. I think it's definitely to protect people, to get people off the street so that whatever, that person did, it doesn't happen to anyone else. But you can't, a detective is, I think, is present and future. I don't think that you can look in the past and think, I should have known what was happening. That's like having the foresight and or being prescient, really, like this is going to happen. So I guess I'm just confused. This just doesn't jive to me. Like, she's not ready to be a detective, but now she is. She's reached this lesson. That's not for me, honestly, what being a detective is. Yeah, so we hear this is her. I mean, this is Batgirl, I think, being Batman almost, right? We didn't do anything. That little boy, it wasn't enough. What about the other boys, girls, men, and women, the people they would have killed, people they won't? Well, yeah, it is just not enough for her. And so I feel like Batgirl is not a detective. She's becoming Batman. And a detective, I don't think this is the definition of what a detective is. Yeah, I don't know. I'd look forward to whatever you guys think, what would your definition be of a detective? I think detectives are on call after the fact. You can't prevent things from happening. I think we get ourselves into trouble. And we've seen those stories, right? Where they're trying to prevent things from happening. And that's yeah, then things just get out of control, right? Because I feel like they did it with but didn't they do that with, basically Civil War, wasn't it? Or no, it was Winter Soldier where they were no. Was it that one with the threats that they were trying to eliminate the threats before they could happen by looking at people's profiles and stuff? Like, that's not being a detective. Okay, I guess I'll move on. I don't even know if I can reach any sort of thing. I just know that that's not what I believe that to be. Oh, okay. So then my ridiculous thing here is the fact that um that hair that he looks at a piece of hair at the very end, and he looks at this pile of humans and points to one and says that's the guy who killed and then the boy, and writes DNA on it. So I know he's Batman, but that is utterly ridiculous to just look at a piece of hair, a fiber, and be like, oh yeah, it's that guy. So I think that's all I have to say. I mean, honestly, it wasn't. I mean, I think the purpose of this is almost leading into the next one of like her now she's going to be training to be a detective, but I I don't know. It was a big throwaway for me. I would almost ooh, I don't know. 7 is a C. Like I might give it a 6. 6 or a 6.5? 6? 6 out of 10 hair fibers? Yeah, okay. So let us mm, okay, next up is Batgirl 35, Blank Slate. Writer Kelly Puckett, penciler Damian Scott, inker Robert Campanella, colorist Jason Wright, and digital chameleon. February 2003 is the cover date. Oracle is helping Batman search for the mysterious assassin Alpha so she cannot help Batgirl with her mission to track down an arms shipment, which Batman assigned to her as part of her training to become a detective. Okay. So in that case, he is preventing that's a preventative measure, right? Because if the arms shipments are being given out, nothing has happened yet. However, the arms shipments are already there. And yeah, that's very loosey goosey because how would they have prevented the murder of those kids by tracking the gang, I guess, and knowing, having the foresight that, yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's crazy. I mean, I would say that's being a detective. Yeah, track down this arm shipment so you can prevent something bad from happening. But I don't know that that works with everything. Okay, anyways, Batgirl goes to start investigating. She saves an amnesiac man named Michael Summers from gangsters who question him about the arms shipment, and she takes him back to his hotel room where they find multiple passports with his name. Batgirl figures he is a secret agent also investigating the case, and she convinces him to work together. They burst into the arms deal at the docks. Michael does not recognize the place, but the gangsters recognize him and don't shoot. One of the gangsters tells Batgirl that he will give her information on a bigger deal rather than go to prison. Between that and seeing Michael fight, Batgirl is able to tell Oracle that she found Alpha. Okay. So this cover here, kind of psychedelic. We've got, I guess, Michael Summers, aka Alpha, the gun. He's mysterious looking because we don't know. Batgirl, and it really is psychedelic. Look, even that who is Alpha right there, and then she's back there. Does it tell me anything about this story? I don't know. Is that a question mark behind him? Oh, I think it is. Oh, it's kind of cool. I don't know if it tells me. Okay, moving on. Let's see here. Oh, this guy, he wakes up. There are a couple things here. So I think one of my biggest criticisms is just this story to me comes out of nowhere, but it's presented as if we should have the information beforehand and we should know who Alpha is. And so that's why when I read 35 and 36, I thought, oh, am I missing something? And that's when I discovered I missed 34, but that has nothing to do with this. I feel like Alpha, we should know this Alpha guy the way it's presented here. And then I thought, oh, is it that 28 where that weird group of people and someone was calling them to track down Cass and engage in fighting with her? But that has nothing to do with it. So I don't know. So that's a huge criticism that it just comes out of nowhere. The thing that the connective tissue, I guess, as it were, is of course the detective vein, right? If you want to show Batman you can be a detective, you need to start thinking like one, which I wonder what Barbara Gordon's belief system is on Batman's detective thing. I think if she were the third person in that conversation between the three of them, would recognize that there's something unhealthy going on there. But I do like how Babs has Cass's number, that her way of detectiving is beating people up, which again, a good definition of being a detective. I don't think we found it yet. Barbara probably knows it, but she's not telling us. There was something funny. I just can't remember if this is if Batman said it. I don't know. Somebody said, "Don't bother me. I'll be busy," but I'm not sure where that is. Okay. So 2003, I did have a I don't know how she finds those people, but it's 2003, but I don't know how they found out which room of the hotel he was, because if they were electronic key cards, you wouldn't have seen a number unless he still had the envelope with it. Maybe it was one of those fancy schmancy ones with the actual key and then a dangling bit that says the room number. But yeah, I don't know. I think it certainly speaks to Cassandra's optimism in people, as we know that that's true, that she sees all these fake passports and she immediately says that he must be an agent, a good agent, of a special agent or secret agent. She doesn't even consider the possibility that he is a bad guy, which is in fact what the correct assumption would have been. And I think it not only speaks to Cass, but also leads us or gives us some presaging into what or a glimpse, I think would be the better word, a glimpse into what the ending will be in that big climactic conversation. I just have a lot of questions, which doesn't often happen, I think, in these previous tales, but it seems to happen a lot with Batgirl, I guess, if it were. But they find this location. I don't really know how they know to go to this particular location. They just show up here and he's like, "Yeah, I don't recognize it. So how did you know where to go?" And I kept flipping back and trying to figure out. I have no idea. We do have a pretty cool sequence of her fight. I think it's this one. Yeah, just with the layout of the panels and how she's fighting and just showing that using art to show the skill of Cass is always good. And per usual, just with coloring and artistic style in Batgirl, whenever we have a glimpse of something or a flashback or hear kind of a memory ping, we use that sepia tone. So, ironically, even though it was Batman's job to actually find Alpha and Batgirl had some other stuff to do, she is, in fact, the one that ends up finding him. I think it's a bit of a leap that, yeah, this must be Alpha because of him taking care of business. But I don't know how she makes that leap. I mean, being a detective must be making leaps in judgment or in logic, I guess. But this could have been anyone. I don't know why that had to be Alpha. She didn't know that the armed shipment had any sort of connection to Alpha. We weren't told anyways by Batman that that had any sort of connection. So I'm not really sure. That's one of my biggest critiques. I think the two big ones are just connecting. I mean, there are these leaps here that have there's no justification for how we got there. And also just making us seem like we should know Alpha when in fact I don't know who this man is. And even when I go on a DC Wikia, these are his first two appearances, 35 and 36. So it's not just me. I have evidence to back it up. And finally, I'll grade 35 and 36 together. We've got issue 36, Point Blank, writer Kelly Puckett, penciler Damian Scott, inker Robert Campanella, colorist Jason Wright, and digital Chameleon. March 2003, cover date. Batman learns that Alpha planted a cold fusion nuclear bomb in Gotham City that could kill 30,000 people, and the only way to find it is to make Alpha talk. Batgirl tells him that Alpha has amnesia and believes he is a secret agent. To find the bomb, Batgirl tells Michael that his mission was to find Alpha and foil the bomb plot, so she has to lie. Alpha recognizes a restaurant and goes inside where some customers recognize him. He fights them, which brings back his memory of killing, and this horrifies him. He tells Batgirl he doesn't want to remember anymore, but Batgirl assures him that as the secret agent, he only did what he needed to do. Alpha suddenly remembers where the bomb is and takes her to an abandoned mine shaft. He is surprised that his phone activates the monetary. He is surprised that his phone activates the mine shaft and that he remembers the deactivation code. But before he can tell her the full code, his memory returns entirely. Isn't that convenient? And he pulls a gun on her. Batgirl reasons with Alpha, who does not believe he can be anything other than an assassin. She shows him her face, and he recognizes her as the girl Kane was training to be an assassin. She assures him, "You can change, you can." Alpha runs out of the mine shaft, but inputs his remote access deactivation code, saving Gotham. Batgirl returns to the Gotham clock tower where she tells Batman and Oracle that Alpha is dead, D. The man formerly known as Alpha, meanwhile, stands on a sunlit beach. And thanks to DC Wikia for the synopses of 34, 35, and 36. Okay, so here, of course, we have the cover for 36. It tells us a great deal, I would say. If you knew who that man was, then you would know that's Alpha and just his danger now. And then, of course, the cell phone, the danger level that he has, I should say, pointing a gun at Cass. And this, of course, speaks to that panel in there where he does that to a guy and remembers what it feels like to have like skull shards come back at you, and he's horrified by it. Well, I don't know how, but there's apparently a connection between Kane and Alpha. I again leaps in storytelling that how Batman needs information, Cass needs information. I don't know why you couldn't just visit Kane in prison. As far as I'm aware, given 29, 30, I can't remember, 29 maybe. We know that Kane is still in prison, so I'm not sure about that. So Batman ends up putting Batgirl in a pretty unethical position because he says, "I know Kane taught you persuasion techniques, physical ones, use them. He's got a nuclear bomb, find it." And Barbara, the way the art is doesn't really show anything on her face, but I think that she probably would be pretty disappointed or concerned with that particular request by Batman to Batgirl, and that he is, whoo, there's Batgirl right there at his finest, asking Cassandra to do that. Especially Cassandra, right? Because I think Batman obviously does it all the time, but with Cassandra, he's trying to, or he had tried actively to pull her away from that particular life, that violent life, and to show her another way. And so to ask her to delve back into that, especially because of Kane, seems a bit suspicious. I think I've already discussed this really, but Batgirl leaves that assumption that this is Alpha. I think it could really just be anyone with martial arts skills. And for me, it just suits the story to say that it's him. And I think that is weak storytelling, weak writing. I think there need to be a better reason for why this is him. I wonder if Cass feels guilty at all with the lying, right? Using him in this way. She needs his help. Help me find this bomb. A case of yours, a man called Alpha. How does she know which case is that he has is pretty interesting. Why doesn't he ask, "How do you know I had this case?" Mm-mm-mm. I don't know. I think it brings up interesting questions about people and their past and who deserves a second chance, and if someone has amnesia, but they were a terrible person before that, what do we do with that, right? Because I think there is guilt. You can't really see it too much on her face, but I feel like knowing Cassandra a little bit, that I think she probably feels a bit dirty doing what she's doing right now. But, if someone were a murderer and they lost their memory and maybe that stuck and they were a completely different person, do we do we forgive all of that and allow them to start over? What amount of grace is there? Because this alpha guy seems like a pretty terrible guy, but he doesn't remember all of that. So do we give him a chance to start over? So I think there are some deep questions here in this particular issue and this two-story arc, at least. Some of these things that we have to go on about alpha, like knowing what button to press to lift the cart in the mine shaft. Um, okay. I see. Here we go. Some of these things we really have to go along with, right? Just like I said, it suits the story that this guy's alpha, but the fact that he knows what button to press to lift the cart in the mine shaft, okay, we'll go along with that. But other ones do make sense, I think, like his ability to fight suddenly coming to him, right? Or some of his feelings about locations. I think just we've seen that muscle memory or something is clicking in place or he gets a flash. So I think that makes more sense than potentially this mine shaft situation because that's just really detaily. This sudden awakening that he has seems a bit suspicious, and the fact that he remembers everything in a split moment. How did that happen? Was he just playing along for a while? So that's a confusion that I have as well. He does call David Kane, I think he uses the F word at one point, and I do wonder if David Kane has friends. That seems a bit suspect. I think Alpha says at one point, I don't know if I'll find it, that David Kane is his only friend. Oh yeah, my only friend is an assassin, right? David Kane. Cass unmasks, which is really interesting because it's not only a big no-no, right? Remember that whole arc where she had to go and erase a bunch of stuff and get back her identity, and Batman was making a big deal about it, and so was Barbara. But she is practicing what she is preaching to Summers about being Summers, right? Not Alpha, and that it's possible to let go of what he was trained to do. And coming from her, I think is big, right? Because she is living it. So I think that certainly compassion, right? She's reached the peak of that person to person emotional pyramid. The fact that Summers doesn't shoot her when he escapes is an indication, I think, that he's changing at this particular moment, that her words came through. And then, of course, he deactivates the bomb. I guess he just needed that short ride to the top, which was 11 seconds, to come to terms with himself and Cassandra's words, which she tries pounding some sense into the computer, but that just does not work. Which that I feel like that bottom right panel there is something that we see frequently, just her particular pose. I feel like I've seen that before on covers and things like that. Cass lies to Barbara and Batman in order to give Alpha slash Michael Summers a second chance. And I'm surprised she doesn't believe in the best of those two, because they certainly have tried to protect people and they give villains second chances. What has Alpha done, or is what Alpha has done any worse than Two-Face, for example, just to bring Batman up and give those second chances? But she may seem to believe that, and I don't think Batman believes her just looking at this bottom panel, but she seems to believe that they may be upset that she let him go, rather than give them a chance. But I'd like to hear her reasoning, right? To say that he's alive, I let him go. We had a conversation, he's changed, that sort of thing. And then to see that grace pop through, and to see also how Batman and Barbara would respond to that. So I would give this arc, which I'm considering 35 and 36, 8.5 out of 10 mine carts. I think there are some leaps in logic that are made in order to make the story work, as well as just jumping into Alpha without much preamble, as if we should have been with him before. But I think the depth of the story and the questions that are asked, in particular, just about humankind, human nature, and I suppose really the soul as well, right? And kind of if you are if your soul has been bathed or dipped in the river Lethe or Lethe, if you know what that is in the underworld, and kind of erased and forgotten everything, do you deserve a second chance? Should you get one, or do you still need to pay for your past crimes and everything? So I think there are some big questions there. I think that there are there is powerful potential here. It just gets muddied with the storytelling. I feel like it's weak storytelling, just because things, you get to from point A to point B. It's really like you're at point B and there was no point A. And so I just have questions about that. The similarities between Alpha and Batgirl, I think, is really interesting. I think that really makes the story work as well, because they're really cut from the same cloth. And then we get to see some depth to Batgirl as well. She's making some questionable decisions here. Batman's making her make some questionable decisions. And then she's also making her own decisions on people, and maybe what they need or what they deserve, and giving them grace. So 8.5 out of 10. I feel like strong potential, strong moral, ethical discussions we could have, but sloppy writing, I guess, if I were to do that. And I'm still thrown off by the detective thing. What's the definition of a detective? That's what I would like to hear from you all. Okay, so I do have some listener emails that I'll do, and then I'll get into, well, I guess actually we'll just take a break, right? So, first of all, I do have 2 YouTube comments, which I got basically immediately after I posted the previous episode. So I can now answer some questions that I had. So first of all, so it was on episode 218, Donovan Morgan Rant. Sorry. He says, just a heads up on John Kent and his boyfriend Jay. They both do covert journalism work for Jay's website Truth, and Jay insisted to keep everyone's identity secret so as to protect them from reprisals. That's why they wear masks. I looked all this up for the review. I also question the knowledge of Superman and Nightwing knowing each other's identities. I don't know how public it's been made that John Kent aged up from a kid to a young adult, but I suppose the opening flashback told him right away that Dick Grayson was Nightwing. Of course, Nightwing is a top-level detective, but it was a teensy bit confusing for a second. Finally, the Titan member killed Risk. Oh, okay. Finally, the Titan member killed Risk was the guy Superboy Prime disarmed in Infinite Crisis, as you'll no doubt remember. Winky emoticon. Yeah, don't we all remember that? So thank you for that. I was asking questions. I think of, why are you wearing masks in public? And who knows? Should Dick know who Jonathan is, and vice versa? All that stuff. Then Kensworth also responding, he said, I'm right on the same page with the Batgirl series right now. The characterization feels off. The villains are crowded and lack motive, and those narration boxes are incredibly jarring without adding anything. I really want to like this book. It has positivity, lots of action, an intriguing art style, and of course, Babs. I'm going to remain hopeful for the rest of this arc, but so far, this book has given me no reason to care about its characters or what they're doing. Instead, I'm writing it out because of character legacy. And we'll see if that changes for me this episode. Okay, and then I have 3 emails. First up, from Ian Prime, aka Ian Miller. Dear Stella, I've just finished listening/watching your Batgirl's #3 review, and I have to say, while I do think your reaction is valid, I have a slightly different perspective. I agree that Babs's relationship to Steph and Cass is awkward right now, and I wish she'd both join them in a trio of Batgirls. And I wish she'd both Okay. And I wish she'd both join them in a trio of back roles on at least some missions and also figure out how to lead more effectively, especially when it comes to listening to Steph's suspicions. I also think that Steph's struggles are very affecting to me right now. She's always felt an insecurity around the Bat family because of Bruce and Tim's doubt of her, and sometimes even of Cass's agreement with Bruce. My difference in perspective, though, is that to me, this is very much the middle of the arc where things get more difficult for the heroes. If we get to issue 6, the end of the arc, and Babs is still in an awkward relationship with the other two back roles, though of course things could still be forming as real relationships do, and Steph is still failing in the field and feeling like the weak link, I'll definitely agree with you. But right now, it feels like these two specific character elements are set up as an obstacle to overcome, and I think that should be a fun story. It reminds me of Gotham Academy, in which I really struggled to like Olive Silverlock for at least the whole first arc. But then when we discovered what happened to her last summer and what was going on in her head during the second semester, I really started connecting more with her. I think something similar will probably happen with this series as the characters fall into a better rhythm with themselves and each other. I also really liked Babs getting to wear a very slinky dress to infiltrate the art meeting. I do agree that the creepy guy is creepy, though the preview to next issue shows Steph meeting him and noticing he knows more than he should, so even more points to Steph. As for the wider readership, the book has some fans like myself for sure, not necessarily loving it intensely, but enjoying it a lot. But it's also attracted many people who are not jiving with it. It's definitely not meeting their expectations either of the history of the characters or of craft. Ooh. While I don't share that perspective, I do see it at least in half of the people I talk to online who have been reading the book, which saddens me, as I'd hoped for a universal acclaim for the book I'd been hoping for since 2014. Hopefully, Clunan and Conrad can prove me right and win people over with the end of the arc. Yours respectfully, Ian Prime. Yeah, it's what is it? Heavy wears the crown, right? Or heavy lies the head, which wears the crown. Because there was a lot of pressure, I think, coming down on Clunan and Conrad when you say you're going to write this Batgirls book that people had been clamoring for 7 years, 7+ years. You want something pretty spectacular to come out. So I can see where people are coming from. I mean, I'm right in there, but yeah, I mean, just I'm gonna stick with it, obviously. And it's nowhere near where some of this, previous back row run has been. So I'm hopeful for that. And I think maybe the positives outweigh the negatives, but I don't want any negatives. And I want to be super excited to open up that book every month. And I'm not necessarily there yet. So I have a lot of empathy, yeah, for the writers. I think that it is a lot of pressure. Whew. Yeah, okay. Another email. This is from my Earth 2 BFF, Shayna. She says, "Hi, Stella. I hope this finds you well. I have to say, I agree with most of your criticisms of the Batgirl's title. If my previous email didn't hint at that enough, I feel like I don't know these characters well enough due to the fact that none of them have had any substantial or consistent character development since the New 52. It seems to me that the coherency and consistency of these characters in particular has gone down as the years have gone on. I miss the days of long term storytelling, character arcs, and an interwoven universe that led to something solid, something these women could stand on and build from. For me, those are the things that lead to a rewarding reading experience, not to mention the sense of time moving forward, these characters changing and growing, the passing down and inheriting of the mantle, etc. When it comes specifically to Stephanie being seen as the weak link, I feel like this is a common go-to when writers are more familiar with criticism/discussion surrounding the character than the character herself. Stephanie and comic books are certainly not the only victims of this. It is unfortunately something I have noticed a lot in our present reality of TV/movie remakes and reboots. I'm going to keep reading Batgirls because it is still early and I am, for better or worse, an optimist, but I am not nearly as excited as I was when this title first got announced. I can only hope this first arc leads to a good foundation for our team. And thank you for indulging me about your history with ancient Greek. I spent a lot of time studying ancient Greek in college, and it is always nice to meet someone else who can appreciate the language. I don't remember a lot of it myself these days, but I have many good memories associated with it. All the best, Shayna. Yeah, I can only say that I agree with you greatly on all points of this. When you were talking about the TV and movie remakes and reboots, I was kind of scrambling in my head trying to think if I could figure out some of the ones that you were thinking about. So, in your next email, should you send me one? Yeah, I'd love to hear what TV/movie remakes or reboots you feel like have more criticism and discussion around particular characters and not necessarily knowing the characters themselves. Yeah. Okie dokie. Thank you. And then my final one is from my sometimes beloved Donovan Morgan Grant. Subject title on the subject of Batgirl. Woo! Eats a book. Okay. Hello, Stella. No, actually, it says hello, Stella. Regarding Batgirls, it's been an interesting last few months of Batgirl the Oracle when it comes to the reviews. Between yourself, Carolyn, and Tom, it's evident that there's a shared sense of confusion and disappointment over the book. Speaking personally, I'm a bit less critical of the title, but I also share one or two observations and would like it to be a bit more refined in the writing. I thought I'd just what? Speaking personally, I'm a bit less critical of the title, but I also share one or two observations and would like it to be a bit more refined in the writing. I thought I'd just share some thoughts. Okay. Number one, the tone. I'm really unsurprised at the comparatively lightheartedness of the series, although how that's being presented is another issue. From the, some might say, intrusive third person narration to the sort of hijinksy behavior of Stephanie Brown, the book doesn't seem to be invested in character drama or even too big of stakes. That's definitely concerning, as it lends to the notion that superheroines aren't characters to take seriously and are better left for younger readers. All three, which if I were to just pop in there, as we know, Maps Mizuguchi is a fun, lighthearted character, but with the backup stories that we've seen in Batman, there were some high stakes there and some tragic and rough things were going on with Maps. So even though I feel like people might not take her seriously, but there's some serious things going on there. So I can see what you're talking about. All three of the Batgirls have had more than their fair share of darkness in their lives, so the cartooniness of the title doesn't map to their personal history. Why I think this is the case is that I'm sensing a kind of young justice approach in this book. Both the original Peter David and Todd Knock run, and even the recent Brian Michael Bendis volume. It reads as a book to get young readers into the characters, but there's a tension in that it's not a great introduction to them, and it plays really fast and loose with their relationships. My gosh. Okay. And it plays really fast and loose with their relationships. So there's not much history being presented for the sake of investment. I'm not saying that one cannot get into the Batgirls through this book, but given who they are, there's a lot more than could be done with them. Number two, the character focus. A frequent critique of the book on Batgirl Oracle is the lack of cover appearances for Barbara Gordon, implying that she is a supporting player for Stephen Cass. Speaking personally again, after several Terabad volumes that went nowhere, billing Babs is the one true Batgirl, I could care, I could care less that she's less than frequently promoted for this one as Oracle. I just have very little empathy in that regard. That he italicized empathy because he knows what I think about it. That being said, it is weird that Oracle returns to being a character who is much beloved but rarely promoted on the front covers in the first place. Maybe for the sake of this arc, she's merely taking a backseat because it's definitely a Stephen Cass story, and that might change. But she also features consistently in Nightwing and currently in Detective Comics and Joker as well. I guess if you're running and punching or wiggling your ass in the case of Nightwing, you know it. That grants you cover space. But I'd also throw in that despite the third person narration, this first storyline seems to see Stephanie as its main protagonist. Babs is the big sister den mother figure, and Cass is her weirdo best friend. Steph's the one who drives the action by suspecting people of being criminals and having the idea to sneak around and involve the Batgirls into investigation. The issue there is that it's presented to be a little immature. Steph's not written to be serious, which is a shallow read of the character, especially when thinking back to the Chuck Dix and Robin days. Was she comparatively cheerier than the other members of the Bat family? Oh, for sure, the cheeriest, but a lot of that was mired in sarcasm and a tendency not to take herself seriously, which denoted a dimension of maturity that the other characters mistook for inexperience. And this leads into number three, characterization. It's always a thing with the Batman characters to worry about proper characterization. Typically, the surface details carry much of their presentation in crossovers or team up books, so mischaracterization is common and annoying. But while it's definitely not perfect, but while it's definitely not perfect in this series, I don't think that the characters have been written too badly. For instance, I like that Babs is really friendly and asks the girls how they're doing. I like that Cassandra isn't written to be too much of an idiot and her limitations in speech isn't distorted to the point of broken English. With this most recent issue number 4, I like several scenes with Stephanie, particularly when she muses, I used to wonder what it was like to be normal. I don't know how that might play to you, but that's a great line from her, in my opinion. She's someone who, even after helping arrest her supervillain father, kept going back out on the streets fighting crime and hardly had a social life aside from her costume companions. This is something that I think is missing from the book perspective. The leftovers from the Fear State and current Seer storyline are driving the plot of this book, but after that's settled, where are the characters psychologically? How does Stephanie want to be Batgirl? Sorry, how long does Stephanie want to be Batgirl? Does Cassandra still want to be Batman? Is Oracle intending to have them replace her? With the intention of this series being almost a YA graphical novel, with the intention of this series being almost a YA graphic novel in terms of breeziness, the needs of the longtime comic reader are getting lost, and with that comes the characterization and everything else. It's not the worst case scenario. None of this, to my mind, has come near the descriptor of bad, but the risk is also still there. There's also, once again, another love interest for Babs, even if she's currently with Dick Grayson. I don't think current DC can help themselves anymore. If they were to reintroduce the Ted Cord romance or have someone she's been with before, I didn't read Eternal, so I don't know how she is with Jason Bard anymore. I don't even know what happened to Jason Bard after that run. What would you think? Or should her orientation remain Nightwing sexual? Yeah, everyone should be Nightwing sexual for the time being. Apologies for the length. Hope this gives you some juicy food for thought. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on these thoughts. Hard man Donovan, which Mama Grant says, you're a hard man, Donovan. And I said to Mrs. Grant, you're right. I basically every time I talk to Donovan, he's a hard man. Oh boy. Yeah. You've got a lot of great thoughts. I don't know even where to begin. I guess if I were to start at the end, I would say that Barbara should be, I think, Nightwing sexual for the time being, if only because I think for the first time in a long time, they have really crafted that relationship well. And I think there's a good foundation and it's not angst filled and dramatic. And let's just have that, run through the Bat books and be serious and worthwhile. So I'm fine with that. I don't know why we have to add this extra guy. And I have a feeling that there's going to be more drama involved with him. I just have this feeling that he's kind of getting into Barbara's head somehow, which because he's you know who. Um, in regards to there's a lot. I don't know if I can answer all this because you do lay out a lot, and I feel like I need some time to mull it over. The big thing was actually really interesting that you said in regards to this being a Stephanie Brown arc. And I think I have a tendency to often look at the trees and not the forest. I think that happened to me with Spooderman and seeing all the different, small pieces of Spooderman. And then it took Carolyn being on and saying, well, this is like basically his origin story. And then, after 3, now we've got we've got Spider-Man, the Spider-Man that you're looking for. I'm like, "Oh, well, yeah, that makes it a bit more palatable." So to think that this might be Stephanie Brown focused arc is interesting, and I think that may make sense than some of the stuff that's been going on specifically to her, and that other people act in reaction to what's going on for her or to her, and perhaps after this arc, it would shift over to somebody else. I don't know if that's necessarily, the nature of a team book. Do you have to hop around and focus on one person in particular for each arc? Couldn't you have equal weight? And that's something I would have liked. And I think this is what Ian was bringing up too, just, the relationship and what does it look like now? We're setting up the status quo in this first arc. Shouldn't everyone get an equitable amount of time? So, yeah, that's interesting that you bring up that it could be, her particular arc. I some of these, the characterization section that you're talking about and where are these characters psychologically, I feel like we don't even see, but with the exception of Seer and I guess Fear State. Are those the only 2 pieces really is Seer, who's just a constant troll, and then the Saints, and then everything else I feel like we don't see too much of, what happened prior. So it's almost as if the world of the Batgirls happens in a vacuum, and there's not too much affecting them, nor are they affecting other pieces outside of them. And with Steph's characterization, I mean, I was trying to catch up on Detective Comics since Kensworth, I know who you are, said that she appears often. So I was like, well, I better read up on these. And even her presentation in there is different, and Cass's, I would say, as well. So it almost is, I mean, it does have this YA feel about it, and it's just existing in its own universe. The tone I'm fine with. Obviously, I don't really care for those narration boxes, but I'll bring them up again with number 4. It is interesting, if it's lighter toned, can we not take seriously what's happening? And I feel like that's not true. I'm a current reader of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I remember a couple issues back there were some letters of people saying, this isn't the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that I grew up with. This is all, what are they even doing here? It's all just kind of cutesy stuff. And I feel like even though the tone was lighter than the initial start of that particular run, that there still were serious things going on. And what is it? What is this mutant town like? What is it like for all these people who without their consent were turned into mutants, the fact that now there's a wall built and all of that stuff, even though there are lighter things going on as well. I think there's a balance to be reached, just like I said with Maps. I mean, Maps and Batman, Maps wanting to be Robin, but then, people dying in that backup and that really affecting her. I think there's a balance that you can reach. With this, I don't know if we've gotten that balance just because things that should be taken seriously are not. I mean, the serial killer is the sticking point. I really don't understand. If by issue 6, Mr. Green is arrested, I will be like, why did it take that long? Stephanie's gonna be like, I told you so. And it's gonna be like a joking matter, even though this man has killed countless people. And ooh, that means that Steph and Cass and Babs were not detectives because they were not preventing these things, according to Batman's. So I feel like the tone it should not hamper it. I think that you can have lighter books, but have serious subject matter. I think Brian Q. Miller's Run is a perfect example of that it was a lighter tone, but there were some serious things going on there. So I don't know what it is about this exactly. Character focus. Yeah, I think, you and I agree really about about Stephanie. Um, and then with Oracle and just Barbara, yeah, I feel like I'm missing all I mean, you have just honestly, without being a sycophant, right? You have a lot of worthwhile things to say. I would agree with you that it's not bad. I think we just had different expectations going in, and our expectations were not met. But I think just like Shayna and Ian had said, waiting until that the end of the first arc to see where we are and what the status quo is. But man, it's just with the characterization, it's interesting because when you read interviews with Clunan and Conrad, it seems like, oh, they know what's up. They know these characters. Um, but then the translation of that, which is interesting, I just read a journal or a chapter article on writing, and that translation from the idea to actually transcribing it, I think did not connect. So, I don't know. Some of these questions here, yeah, how long does Stephanie wanna be Batgirl? I don't think that's her. She wants to be Batgirl as long as her friends want to be. I think she's certainly one who, once people start kinda going away, I think she's gonna be hanging it up. Um, I don't wanna make it sound like Stephanie's just in it for the friendships, but I think that's certainly a driving force, right? That there's this communal aspect of being a Batgirl that's really important to her. I think that it's not as important. I feel like there's a spectrum of importance of, this lifestyle and who can give it up and who can't. And Barbara, I think, can give it up. Stephanie, I think, can give it up. I don't think that Cass can give it up. Does she want to be Batman? No, I don't know if I see this particular Cassandra being Batman, though in general, I could see Cassandra Cain being a Batman. Um, yeah, I think that Oracle Barbara in particular, I think that she is ready for that legacy to continue on and for her not to be the legacy, not to be a part of that necessarily, but, move on and do a different role or work in a different capacity. But I don't think DC agrees with us. I think DC just wants her to constantly hang on to it, and that makes it seem really unhealthy. Like you can't let go and you can't move on. I think that's a problem. I guess, oh man, I feel like I'm missing so much of what you said. There's certainly a lot going on here, but I really appreciate all this. I felt like it was really well said and well thought out as well. So I'm hoping. I mean, I'd like to see what you think after this arc is finished and where we stand, I guess, at the beginning, at the threshold of issue number 7. But whoo, we'll see. Thank you to all who wrote in. Thank you also for the YouTube comments. I appreciate that. Learning some stuff as well. I'm going to take a break, obviously. When I come back, I'm going to cover some modern quickies, including Nightwing, and a full review of Batgirl's number 4. But first, it is Zaius's radio hour. And even though I've done it before, because I have completed my Excel document of all the songs used on Batgirl Oracle, I had to do it again for obvious reasons. It is Zaius's radio hour featuring All Star by Smash Mouth. See you guys soon.